everybody, welcome to Tuesday. It's my favorite day of the week. We get to talk to someone who's doing awesome stuff with hardware, and this week's guest is extra special because we went to high school together. I'm just going to leave with that. What's up, Emma?
Hi, excited to be here.
Me too. So Emma Fletcher is a co-founder of tool companies, two or more.
Currently two active. I've done a number of other companies, but two main ones.
Cool. So those comprise Rocket Department, or Learn to Solder Kit, which used to be
Yes,
called Rocket Department, and
correct.
Evergreen Support, which I think is a really interesting one that will be interesting to you, small business hardware owners, small hardware business owners, especially. Lots of rave reviews, including from Ellie of Cocoa Press. So cool. So, okay, could you tell us first, what got you into electronics? How
Oh,
did this
that's a
work?
good question. So I was always kind of little techie in like middle school and high school. In middle school, I was like programming my TI-89 calculator.
Oh yeah.
I learned how to do like if-else statements on that calculator, and I thought that was really cool. And then I was also into Neopets. I feel like I'm kind of dating myself here, but I was into
Yeah.
Neopets, and I learned how to do like web development because they gave you like a single page for your Neopet. And so I was playing around with that. And so by the time I got to high school, I joined the robotics team. And I think that's where it like really started for me. I was in first robotics. I thought it was awesome. We built these really cool robots and competed with them. That's where I learned how to solder, do some hardware, do more programming. And so then I went to college to study computer engineering. And oh yeah, there's our team.
Yeah, we had a couple names over the years, but I like the one that they've got now.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I went to college for computer engineering and then kind of rest is history. I got involved with the maker movement, had various jobs as a software engineer, and then started my own, techie business.
Yeah, let's take a look at those. So we've got let me get rid of this banner here. Exploring a world of engineering possibilities with Learn to Solder kits. Tell us about this company.
Yeah, so this one I started 8 years ago, actually. I was working at Intel at the time, and I was volunteering in their engineering outreach program, where they're working with a lot of different high school students in the area to get them into engineering. And one of the workshops that I led was the soldering workshop, and they provided us with a bunch of soldering kits. And I didn't really love the ones that were provided, mostly because they were very complicated, right? It was like a lot of
Mm.
soldering points, like 100 LEDs. And it's
Wow.
kind of hard to keep like a 12, 13-year-old engaged, through a project that has that many LEDs or that, they were taking 60, 90 minutes. And if the student wasn't like already hooked on engineering, they might become really frustrated, or they do all that work and then it wouldn't work at the end, and they'd be frustrated about that. And so I had kind of these bad experiences trying to share something that I loved and I knew was really cool and fun. And I was like, well, I could just design my own kit. I'm going to make it really simple. It's going to be a 30-minute or less project, right? Almost impossible to mess up. I mean, you can still mess it up, but it's pretty hard. And so by the end of it, after those 30 minutes, you have this sense of accomplishment, right? And it's like, oh my God, it lights up. And my hope is that that's enough to kind of get them hooked to do the next project, maybe actually do that 100 LED project or whatever it is. So they have this really positive first experience instead of becoming frustrated and then not trying again.
Yeah. So was this the first one, or which one of these
Yeah,
was?
Blink was the first one, and I have a Blink here too that
Oh
I
yeah.
assembled for this. Oh, here it is. So it's just three buttons and LEDs, three resistors, a battery, right? Super simple. But there's something really tactile about it, right? When you push that
Mm.
button and it lights up, and you're like, I did that, right? Like, oh my God, I made it light up, right? Even me, who's, I've engineered a lot of things, built a lot of different projects, I still put together a Blink and I'm like, that moment it turns on. And so that was the first one
Same.
I designed. And I started teaching classes with it at our local hacker space. And it was a big hit.
And was this in Sacramento?
Yeah, this was in Sacramento. So I was working at the Folsom office up at Intel. And then we had a hacker space at the time called Hacker Lab, which is
Mm.
here in downtown Sacramento. And I would run a soldering workshop, I think 2 Saturdays a month. I would be there and, just teach soldering to newbies. And I had people of all ages come, to learn how to solder. And it was a lot of fun. I did that for probably 2 or 3 years.
So, how did you get involved in hacker spaces in the first place? What was your first experience with hacker spaces? Because this was a
My
big part of my journey too.
Yeah, my first one was actually Hack DC. So I went to school in Washington, DC, and I was in engineering school. And I get to engineering school my freshman year, and I'm like so pumped to build more robots, right? I was like, this is going to be great. I'm going to spend 4 years building robots, and it's going to be like so cool. And I get there my freshman year, and they're like, okay, you're going to take calculus and physics and differential equations and like all this book stuff, which is great and definitely has its place in education. But I really wanted to do hands on projects.
Mm.
That's what I loved and kind of excelled at. Was not as strong in the book and math learning side of it. And so I don't even know how I heard about Hack DC. I think an older student had been to Hack DC or something like that. And he was like, oh, you should go. They do these cool workshops. And I looked at their calendar and I just took the metro out and it was in this cool spot. It's like the upstairs of a church, this tiny little
Ooh.
room. I don't know if they're still there, but at the time, and I started going to workshops there. I met a few other people. I learned about Maker Faire, and I went to the one in New York City. And I think that
Mm.
was probably my sophomore year of college. I took the bus up to New York to go to the big Maker Faire there, and I was blown away. I was like, "Oh my god, this
Oh
Raspberry
yeah.
Pi thing is so cool!" And that just kind of started it all for me.
Yes. Maker Faire, if you're not familiar, they just had their Bay Area one, and I guess they're doing it again next year. But yeah, Bay Area or Maker Faire is not dead. They were having a moment where they were ramping down, but now they are pretty much back. And as Emma mentioned, there's New York one, there's Rome, there's Bay Area, etc.
Yeah. And Make Magazine actually did an article on Learn to Solder kits, I think last fall. So about a year ago, I was in it with a few other kit makers. And that was like my moment. I was like, oh my God,
Ah!
college me would be so thrilled, right? To be in Make Magazine. Yes, there it is. And that was just, I don't know, that just felt really good, over my 10-ish year journey to have made it. There's Carrie. She's also
Yeah,
a really awesome kit maker. Recommend checking out her stuff.
we have had her
And
on the cafe before. Go check it out.
she's really cool. And Nancy, also awesome. So great article with some amazing women in the kit making industry.
So cool. And you and I actually ran into each other at Bay Area Maker Faire a few years ago, which might have been the last time we like met in person. But
Wow.
at that point, so other people might also know you from Rocket Department. And
Yes. Oh my
for
gosh, you found the website. That's amazing.
and so I was like, is this the same thing as Learn to Solder Kits? Is it
Yeah.
different? It turns out they are the same thing, but
Well,
like well
kind
through
of. Like, Learn to Solder Kits kind of started as part of Rocket Department.
right.
So, Rocket Department has kind of a funny origin story. So, I'd been
Mm.
in Sacramento for maybe like a year or two. I was hanging out at Hacker Lab, and they had this hackathon where you could build anything, right? And these were like really big in like, I don't know, 2013 to like 2019, maybe. I don't know if they're quite as big, but these hackathons were a big deal at
Mm.
our local makerspace. And it was a weekend where like maybe 48, 36 hours. And you would just build something and present it, right? A lot of people were doing apps at the time, but I got together with this team and we're all more into the hardware side with a little bit of programming. And so we
Mm.
decided, why don't we build a hardware project over this weekend and we'll make this app based cereal dispenser. So you control it with your phone and it had like three different things. Yes, there it is. Cereal Hack 4 was the hackathon. And we created Ready Set Cereal. And so it has three different spaces to hold cereal, and then you mix and match the cereal. So you could do like half and half, or a third of this, third of each one. And then it had like a milk dispenser attached to it and a little spoon dispenser that would like shoot down this spoon into the bowl that's like sitting at the base of it. And I mean, it was kind of a joke, right? Like we built it just to like, I don't know, just as a joke to have this crazy, ridiculous thing that we presented at the end of the weekend. And at the end, we actually won the hackathon. And like the judges are there, they're like, oh yeah, I could definitely see this like on a college campus, or like at the Jelly Belly factory or something. I'm like, really? Okay. I mean, it was cool, but it was logistically kind of held together with duct tape, right? It wasn't a production ready product.
It reminds me of that era when everything had to be social. It was like, oh, we'll make this thing social, that thing social. I was working for a social point of sale company where it was like you could update your company Facebook from the register. And it's like, why?
Exactly. We actually gamified it as well.
Yes.
So we had like badges in the app, the more cereal that you ordered, right? I mean, as ridiculous as we could make it. So we built it, we won the hackathon, and then at the end of the hackathon, they're like, okay, here's your prize. It's an incorporation package. You can now take your idea and turn it into a business. And we're all like, we don't really want to run a cereal dispensing business, as cool as it is. But we'll take this free prize and we'll incorporate it as a company. And we became Rocket Department. So it was the 5 of us who were on that team. And then our idea was kind of, we'll just build other cool projects. Like people can hire us to build projects. We'll build our own internal projects. So it's kind of consulting, type of role, doing mostly early prototypes for people. People would come to us, they just had an idea, maybe like a slideshow, and that was about it. And then we would build kind of their first prototype so they could go out and get funding. And so we did that for probably 5 years. But one of the projects that I started kind of inside the company was learn to solder kits, because it was something I was passionate about. And I was like, well, this could be a Rocket Department project, why not? And so I started that, launched it, and we did a lot of outreach and donations and other things like that. Eventually, the Rocket Department team kind of came apart. People moved different places, right? But I loved to learn to solder kits so much that I just kept doing it, right? And then it kind of became the main focus instead of the consulting side.
And so you renamed the company to
learn to solder kits. I'm not a
which is great
namer.
No, it's perfect, because I mean, I imagine the SEO on it is just like incredible.
SEO is great.
So many questions about this. Okay, so first up, I'm curious. So in your origin story that you've written in a couple different places, you mentioned that you were frustrated sometimes with the quality of kits where the PCBs would degrade from the heat, and then it would make things harder for like first-time soldering students. And I'm curious because you've got the Jitterbug kit, and then you've also got the Deluxe soldering kit.
Yes.
What makes a kit? Well, what makes these kits better than the ones that you started out with? How do you find and choose a PCB manufacturer, I guess, and what makes this kit Deluxe?
Question. So we actually use PCB Way now, which I really like. They're super easy to work with, and so we have gold ENIC on our boards, right? Which is just so much easier to work with, right? If you've done the really like cheap PCBs, right, where they just have those surface traces, those were a lot of kits that were on the market at the time. I think the market has changed a bit in the past 8 years. But way back when, before there were a lot of other kit makers, they just had these surface traces, and if you heat them up wrong, it just lifts right up off that board, right?
Yeah.
And then, if you're an experienced solderer or electronics worker, you can be like, okay, I'm going to put in a jump wire here, no problem, right? But for a new person who's coming into it, it's baffling, right? It's frustrating. And they're usually not skilled enough to create kind of a hack fix on the board. And so when I did it, we actually started with Osh Park as our board supplier, also a fantastic company. They have super high quality boards. And so we started with them. And then eventually we got to a scale where we moved to PCB Way.
Sweet.
Yes, Osh,
Okay, so
great.
for you, that's a scale thing?
Yeah, for us, it's a scale thing. We're doing about 1,500 kits a month right now.
Wow, nice.
It's a lot of kits, right? And so I think probably when we reached about 300 to 500 kits a month, we started to have to think more about like bulk ordering, logistics, where we could get savings in our bill of materials because we're ordering so many boards at a time now. But I still love Oshpark, highly recommend them. I still order boards through them if I'm prototyping or anything like that. Yeah, PCBs
Yeah.
is our new supplier. And they're really great too. I mean, they ship fast, particularly for overseas.
Yeah. And so, how else do you make this affordable without sacrificing quality? So, as you've grown as a company.
Great question. So, one of the things we do that I think is kind of unique is we actually assemble all our kits, what I would call in house here in Sacramento. So, we have two part time employees who work for us and they do all the kit assembly. So, if you are getting a kit, which is really just all the parts, let's see, I've got one assembled here. You're showing a photo, but like, here's what it comes with, right? You got your board, you got your battery, and then there's a pink bag inside of it that has your LEDs, resistors, push button switches. And we do that all here in Sacramento. And I think having employees who are really invested in the company helps to keep our quality really good. We almost never get returns. I'm not going to say never because, once in a while stuff happens. But almost never. We hold ourselves to a really high standard to make sure that you get the parts you need to complete your project because nothing sucks more than getting the kit and realizing
Mm.
you can't complete it, right?
Yeah.
And so we have checks in place, right, with our employees who are assembling. So every kit gets checked at least twice, usually 3 times, before it gets shipped out to make sure everything is in there and it's ready to go.
Yeah. And this is your well, wait, this might be before the Hue one, but I'm also still curious about the difference between the Deluxe soldering kit
The
and the
Deluxe
regular
kit
kit.
is our new kit, right?
Yeah,
Brand
you were just
new.
saying that somebody like swooped in and uh
So they
before you
did.
even announced it.
I
That's
put
so
it
cool.
on Shopify. I want to say it was like just a month ago. We've been working on this for we've been talking about this for years, right? So one of the things when you're running a business and you're shipping like a ton of kits, you'll realize you're like, oh, I really want to do this cool new project, and you get so busy like just doing the day to day, right? Especially if you're
Mm.
shipping more and more kits, that it's hard to bring a new product to market. So one of the things we talked about was this Deluxe kit, and we really started focusing on it in March of this year. Andy, who's my partner in Learn to Solder Kits, he kind of took the lead on it and doing all the designs for it. And we just launched it in October. We did our first 1,000 unit run. And the
Ooh.
Deluxe title basically means it comes with everything you need to complete the kit. So it's going to come with all the tools. You'll get a soldering iron, soldering stand, solder, snips, safety glasses, all of these things. And you can just do the kit because we found a lot of new people or people who are giving the kit as a gift. We're like, oh, I don't have everything I need to actually do this kit. And then they would have to go find it, right? Buy all the stuff.
Yeah.
And so this perfect Christmas present, if you're Christmas shopping, right, is buy the Deluxe kit, everything you need, wrap it up, looks great. And so this is our Deluxe version. We plan to come out with Deluxe versions of Hue and Blink as well. We started with Jitterbug though. It's our most popular kit. And so
It
this
is
is,
very cute.
thank you. I'm really proud of how it came out. It looks even better than I imagined.
It's a very charismatic bug.
It is. I actually brought another show and tell that I thought this would be
Oh,
funny.
yes.
So we have like the regular assembled bug here, right? This
Uh-huh.
is kind of like what most people do. But when I'm in classes and things, I tell people to make the kit their own, right? You don't just have to do it to match, the instructions. You can kind of be a little creative. And this is an example from a friend of a more creative kit. It still works, right? But you can see that it's a little unique, right, in its own way. And I keep this here on my desk, right, to kind of remind me that I don't know, you don't have to do it exactly the way the instruction says. It turns on, it lights up, project complete, right? They learned how to solder, but it's just a little different.
Love it. And I love that the kit includes this silicone mat. So I actually use a silicone baking mat that I got on the internet for my desk because it's easy to
Yes.
get like a single color. But look at this.
That is exactly
Look
where the idea
at
came from too. So I was using silicone baking mats in my class. So what kind of happened is I was teaching at the makerspace, right? And I would have about 10 to 12 students in my class. And I ended up buying sets of 12 basically soldering sets, just like the deluxe kit, right? It has the iron, the
Mhm.
stand, a baking mat that I found on Amazon, and a few other things. Because I found when I was going to schools, I started getting invited to schools or businesses or after school clubs to teach soldering. And they would put me in these places, like these really nice classrooms that were not really like workspace classrooms, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
was like, okay, your desks are beautiful,
Uh-huh.
right? And we're going to be soldering on them. And I really do not want to damage, your lovely classroom. So the silicone baking mat is great. Highly recommend it for anybody who is soldering. And so from that idea, we decided to design our own silicone electronics mat, right? And so this is all focused on electronics. It's a quick reference, and it's heat resistant. So even if you stab it with the soldering iron or you get little solder gloves on it, it is super tough. I actually have one here, so
Ooh.
you can kind of see what it looks like in person.
I will note that for hot glue as well, like
Ooh.
it just like beads up on there and like you can pull it off no problem. Hot glue, solder, flux, whatever, no problem. Just like
Yeah,
I keep some IPA to wipe it down with every now and then, like before I do a video. It's so good.
absolutely. So you can see it's nice and thick, right? Really nice printing on it. And, just a handy reference for people who are new to electronics, or even if you've been in electronics for a while. We got the resistor color codes on here. We got some formulas. We got pinouts, right? Little breadboard.
The SI
So,
prefixes are one that like I actually have made little cheat sheets for myself lately because
mhm.
like that's one I can never remember. And when you're like especially dealing with capacitors, such a pain in the butt. And the fact that you have it on there is great. Breadboards as well, like explaining to people how they're connected internally can be a really hard thing for people to pick up when they're just
Yeah,
starting. That's a great one
definitely.
too.
So really happy. So you can get the silicone mat by itself if you want it on our website, or if you order the deluxe kit, it comes in the deluxe kit as one of the many great things to set up your little electronics workspace.
This is amazing, and it's perfect timing right now, I think, especially because 'cause we're going into the holiday season.
Yes.
Like, I think that that would be a really cool one.
Engineer their gift, right? Get
Yes.
them hooked and teach them how to solder and
You're
open.
welcome, everybody, we just solved your gifting problems. Cool.
That's
I'm gonna
right.
make a little note here. Okay, cool, yeah. Uh, okay, let's see, what next? Finding quality PCBs. So, yeah, let's talk really quickly about your other company.
Okay.
You mentioned scaling from being a small company and stuff, but especially the handling the returns part.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, you're very proud that you've had very few returns, but when you do have to do a return, that seems like one of the most stressful parts of running a small business. Like from the
Yeah.
research that I've done, that's like what people fear the most, and like it's a horrible process. And
It
so
can
you
be. It can be.
yeah, and that's the point with your other company, Evergreen
Yeah.
Support, right? Among
Yeah.
other things, dealing with stuff like that. How does the business work? Are you managing tickets? Are you like
Great
doing the
question.
support for people? Like what is it?
Yes, some. So I'll kind of start with how the idea came about, which it totally came out of Learn to Solder Kits, right? So I was running Learn to Solder Kits. Like I said, I've been doing it for 8 years. So I actually went full time on running my own businesses last March. So it's been about a year and a half. But before that, I was working as a software engineer full time and then assembling kits. This was before we had employees, assembling kits on nights and weekends, doing the shipping, doing the
Mhm.
customer support, right? Doing all of it while also having this 40-hour a week job. And as we got bigger and bigger, it just wasn't sustainable. And it started to get really stressful, right? It's like, okay, I got to
Mhm.
watch the inbox. I got to do the shipments. I got to do like, there's just so much going on. And I was like, man, I wish I had somebody I really trusted to just check in on the inbox twice a day, once or twice a day. We don't get a ton of support tickets that come in. We maybe get a couple a day. But I just wanted to take it off my plate, but it was hard to find somebody who I could trust to do that. And it's hard to hire somebody to do that job. You're like, well, it's 15 minutes of work, right? I'm not going to pay you for an 8-hour work day, right?
Right.
It's only 15 minutes, but who's going to do that job? And so this was a problem that I had for a few years, right? And I couldn't really find a solution. And eventually it worked out that I had the opportunity to start a company with somebody that I've worked with before. That's Ellis in the photo. She's my business partner. And we actually worked together at a different company. And I kind of pitched her this idea. I was like, I've been struggling with this problem. Like, there's got to be other people who are struggling. What if we just do their inboxes for them, right? And I've done Learn to Solder kits. She had some support experience. And we just launched it and started pitching it to small business owners. So we really focus on either solo entrepreneurs, so they're doing it themselves, or maybe 2 to 5 employee sized companies to help them with their inbox. And so we bring in all of our knowledge of customer support. We get that return process really smooth, if they've been struggling with it. So even when it happens, we can handle it for the business owner so they can go focus on what they need to do, whether it's new product development, marketing, shipping. I mean, there's a million things to do when you run a business. And we have 15 companies now that we support, a mix of e-commerce and SaaS companies. And it's been going really great. It's really fun to meet the other business owners and help them achieve what they want with their business.
Yeah. So you've got a great resources page here. And on the front page, you have some FAQs. So I actually was curious about some of these as well. So like, do you do live chats or phone calls?
No, that's the one thing we don't do, right? Because I realize, like, man, I don't know how we would manage it, right? Because like right
Oh
now it's
yeah.
kind of like it's like a workload problem, right? Like when you think even about like engineering, right? It's like where do you fit in these different checks? And we kind of make a schedule throughout the day of which inbox we're going to go in. But sometimes you get in
Ah.
an inbox and you're like, oh my God, what happened? Right? Like sometimes they just blow up. And our schedule allows us to shift things around. But I think if we were doing phone calls, it would be, too much to make that work. But most of these online companies, email support works really well. Once in a while, we'll hand something off to the business owner who's going to get on the phone with that customer. But we can really solve 95% of stuff over email.
Nice. And you do create documentation, and you, like you mentioned, you can escalate to the
Yeah.
business owner if needed. All
Yeah.
kinds of good stuff.
I think the cool thing about Evergreen Support is while it is not technically an engineering company, I took all of my engineering knowledge and just applied it to a different problem, right? And so, working as a software engineer, I just understand how valuable good documentation can be. Uh,
Yeah.
And the same applies to customer support, it turns out, right? And a lot of these businesses, everything is inside the business owner's head, which is great when the business is small and they don't need to work with anybody else. But then as they scale, we kind of help take that knowledge out of their head and put it into, we mostly do internal documentation. Once in a while, we'll help with some external FAQs as well. So customers can better serve themselves and don't need to write in for emails as much.
Right. So what you don't just support engineering companies, although that is kind of how you started.
Yeah.
What's the most interesting, or to you, the most interesting type of company you support?
Oh, that's a great question because they're all interesting in different ways,
Right.
right? I mean,
Maybe
Ellie
the
from
most
Cocoa
surprising.
Press is definitely one
Oh
of my
yeah.
highlights, right? I just think what she has done is so freaking cool, right? And I tell people
Yeah.
about it, I'm like, there's this 3D printer and it prints chocolate, and you have to see it to believe it, right? Have you had her on the show?
Yeah. Well, we had her on Hangout and Nerd Out, which was a collaboration with
Cool.
Make last year.
That's awesome. So I think that is definitely one of the coolest, right? That's probably the one I talk about the most, right?
It's so
And
cool. It's
I'm
so
just
cool.
like very inspired by it. I think that like what she has done designing and building this 3D printer is so freaking cool, right? And I like have these little soldering kits, which I'm very proud of my soldering kits, right? But in terms of
Yeah.
complexity of bringing a product to market,
Oh my gosh.
what she has done is like amazing. She's my hero.
I think she mentioned like how many years she's been at this, and I forget whether it was like 9 years or some like incredible number of years to like
Wow.
get it to this point, and it's just incredible what she's done.
And yeah, like the chocolate formulation, like she knows all the stuff about
Yeah.
chocolate and how you mix chocolate and how to make it more printable, right? I mean, just the number of problems to solve to get to a point where you have a machine and chocolate cores that you can ship to people. I mean, it's just so cool.
Incredible. What's the weirdest question you've gotten regarding these? If
Oh,
you can
the
say.
weirdest question. A lot of people who write in have some like interesting things they want to try, right?
Mm.
They're, of either things they want to mix into the chocolate or cool things they want to
Oh.
print, right? It's neat to see the creative application, right? Of things that I'm like, wow, I would never think of that,
Yeah, whoa. I'm trying to think of what I would put in there, but maybe it's best because that's a road that maybe leads to me really wanting one, and that would be a problem
I totally
in
won't.
my
I
life
have
right
not
now.
ordered one, but there have been moments where I'm like, maybe I should. I'm like, how much chocolate am I gonna print and eat? I don't know. I don't know. We have to see.
Like, I think it makes a lot of sense if someone's like doing promo for their own company and they're like,
Yeah.
um, so where did my little tab go with this? I was curious about documentation. So what are your tips for someone making documentation? Because you're not only making internal documentation, you've also made all these beautiful instruction kits and stuff. But then
Yeah.
also you do internal documentation for companies for Evergreen Support, which sounds like it starts internally to your company, but then also you create it and you share it with the business owners.
Yes, yeah. Business owners have full access to all the documentation we create, right? They're welcome to, if at any time they decide to hire someone in-house or Evergreen Support isn't the right company for them, they're more than welcome to take the documentation that we've created and use it. I think tips for creating documentation, it's a fine line between being specific and over documenting, right?
Ah.
You kind of have to find that balance of like, and I think we've struggled with this and gotten better at it over time, is like, do we need to document this very specific, like, okay, what do we do if the return is for a damaged bolt, right? Or do we
Mm.
need a documentation that's more general, right? About like, how do we handle returns? And then maybe with like a subsection about, okay, damaged part or something like that. And so I think looking at it and understanding when to be general and when to get really specific, it can be tough, right? Because sometimes I think you're documenting and you're like, I don't know what I'll need in the future. I'm going to document everything, right?
Yeah.
And then you just end up with this huge document, and you're like, well, this isn't even helpful now, right? Because to read it all is going to take longer than figuring it out again.
Mm. Uh, and you've got these gorgeous where's my tab? Here we go. Okay, so uh especially this thing about not including everything in your guide. I've taught soldering classes in the past, and we would refer to Mitch Altman's soldering comic just
I
because
love the
like
soldering comic. That's a
yeah,
great
I
one.
know a lot of people who like refer to this because it's like, we want to teach people about our kit, the specific project that we're doing, but also there's this basic like, how do you teach someone to solder? And he's really kind of solved it for a while. But you've got like so sometimes I guess the solution is to like break it out into multiple pieces of documentation that can refer to
Yeah.
each other. But when you can only really put one thing in a kit, this is gorgeous, and
Yeah,
I'd
thank
love to hear more
you.
about your process of putting this together
Well,
versus
and
like.
I think this is a good example, and then I'm also going to show you another example. So we decided to, for our deluxe kits, we actually have a printed instruction booklet, and this is new for us. And it is a bit more specific than those PDF ones. I mean, the PDF ones are always going to be available, of course, to people. But if they want to get a little bit more detailed about the circuit, like this instruction booklet actually covers the circuit diagram, right?
Ooh.
And it goes into more information, I think, about, if you could see that, how to set it up with your water on your soldering stand and different stuff. Because we found that some people who would write into us, like they love the instructions we had in the PDFs, but then they're like, I want to know more, right?
Mm.
And so the Deluxe kit features this printed booklet, which I think is really nice. You can definitely skip over pages if you're like, I'm not interested right now, and maybe come back to it when you completed the project, right? But I think pictures really help too. That we're all about the pictures, if you could tell from the PDF, and same in the book. Just to get that visual aspect, right? Of this is what it should actually look like when I.
And even the packaging. Like
Even the
so much
packaging. So
information
Andy
on
did the
there.
packaging. I cannot take credit for the packaging. It's beautiful. He does it all in a CAD software, actually,
Really?
in Onshape.
No way.
And he loves Onshape. You can have him on the show, and he'll talk to you about Onshape for an hour.
I also love Onshape. I'm so
And
curious about how you what?
There's actually Onshape models on our site now. They might be under additional resources on the site. I'm trying to think where I put them. Open source. Yeah, go to open source. No, they're not there. I'm trying to think. Maybe it is there. Oh, yeah, there. It is there. It's the tab that's opening next to it. Is the
Yes, I recognize
new.
that favicon.
Yeah, there you go. So you can
Look at
get.
that!
And so
Oh
we're
my
all
gosh!
open source too. So if you're curious about it, or you want to, modify it, make your own soldering kit kind of based on our designs, you are more than welcome to.
Make an
Um,
enclosure.
Make an enclosure. We've seen some really cool ones throughout the years, right? So
Wow.
definitely feel free to explore our website, explore the Onshape documentation. This was just launched about a month ago as well. So this is kind of our new documentation that's come up.
This is so cool.
Yeah, I think it looks really
What?
nice.
What?
You
I don't even know you could do this in Onshape.
can
What's
do
going
all sorts of
on?
crazy things. I have learned from Andy, right? I am not a great modeler, but I think this is awesome.
You can zoom into infinity. Actually, this could be a useful way to teach people about, like, are you curious about how an LED works? Well, this side is the cathode, this side is the anode.
Yeah.
I'm always trying to remember new ways to memorize that, but maybe I just need to look at a diagram real close up and be able to, like, zoom around it, and maybe that'll make my brain work.
Yeah.
This
No,
is
it's
so
it's
cool.
nice. And I think this is going to be really helpful to the educators who use our kits. So out of those units that we sell per month, about half of them go to schools, either middle, high school, or colleges. And we get a lot of requests from educators of like more curriculum or more ways to get deeper into the kits, right? Even though they were designed to just be like a 30-minute intro project, a lot of teachers like to use them in maybe their like electrical engineering 101, right? Like the first project that people do when they're starting engineering school. And so this documentation is part of that as well, to give them more resources to pull from.
Cool. My mind is blown there. Sorry, I went on a little tangent, kind of just dragging this stuff around.
No, it's awesome. I love
It's
it. I
so
think it's super
cool.
fun to play with, and I'm glad we get to show it off.
The color mixing. Okay, enough of that.
Look at
So
the details though. Like if you look at the like battery holder, he's got like the
there's the
logo
name
on
on it.
it, right? It's very detailed. He
It
spent a
even
lot of
says
time
year
on this.
2032. It says everything.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Please enjoy. Everybody can go to our website and play around with it. And
No
that's what it's
way.
for. So
That is so cool. Okay. So back to what you're doing. Um, you do have these educator packs, and like you were
yeah,
talking about, people like to use them to teach, and so you can get these educator packs, and you also have, I believe, somewhere on your site you had some info about how, like, if you are an educator, you can
yes,
get a free sample pack.
that
So,
is true. That is under additional resources,
aha.
educators. So any educator who's watching this, and you don't have to be like an
Mm.
official full-time teacher, even if you're doing like after school programs, volunteering. you can go here and request a free kit. So this opens a little form. You'll fill it out with your information, and we will send you a free kit so you can evaluate it for your classroom, see if you like it and you want to use it with your students. And so that's something we've done. It's been really popular with educators. I mean, I love supporting educators. It's also a great marketing and sales tactic, right?
Yeah.
That educators get the kit, and then they usually show it to either their principal or head of department, get some funding to purchase more kits for their classroom.
Yeah. And then so they can get them in these like multi-packs.
In the multi-packs, we do 8, 16, and 32 on the website, packs of kits, and you get a price break at every one. And then if you're interested in 50 or more of one type of kit, you can send us an email and we'll give you a specific quote for that as well. So if you're buying a lot of kits, you can definitely save some money.
Oh yeah, really good for teachers.
Yeah.
There was another question. Brain. Regarding educators and multi-packs, it's gone out of my head. But let's do some quick lightning round questions, and maybe it'll come back to me. So, do you 3D print?
A bit. I wouldn't say I'm a heavy 3D printer. Maybe a 3D printer admirer.
Do you have any other hobbies that you feel sort of overlap with or inform or integrate with the electronics that you create?
Yeah, so this one might be a stretch, but I kind of think it overlaps if you're into crafting. So I actually like cross stitching.
Ooh,
Um,
yeah.
I feel like cross stitching is kind of similar to electronics and engineering in a way. And actually, our first hire for Learn to Solder Kits, this is kind of a fun fact, had no background in electronics, but a heavy background in crafting.
Uh-huh.
And she's been fantastic, right? Because I just feel like there's some overlap between parts and building things and creating. I don't know, but I think those really overlap in an interesting way.
I've seen some really interesting electronic cross-stitch projects,
I
including
want to
like,
build
with
some. I have not built one yet, but yeah, there's my question. I saw somebody who built a software product around cross stitching, right? Which I also thought was really
Mm.
cool. And I love those kind of projects that are these interesting overlaps. Oh yeah, there's my project that I'm
So
working on.
cute. I love the
That's a
little
gift for a friend. So
pin there too.
but I
I'll
think
have to
it's
check that
cool
out.
when
That's
you
awesome.
take like a hobby, like cross stitching or something, that people would consider like non-technical, right? And then
Mhm.
like apply an interesting technical twist on it, whether you build electronics into it, or in that example, like she's building a repository of cross stitch patterns, right? For people to share. And so I think using your techie knowledge to bring that to other hobbies and other spaces is really interesting.
Yeah. It'd be cool
Yeah.
if there were like a subset for like, ooh, cool. Maybe there will be one for electronics. This is so
Yeah.
cool. Oh no, new hobby. No. I just got back into knitting and crochet.
Oh, knitting. Yeah,
Uh
that's another great one.
I know, danger zone. I can only sustain so much.
Yeah, you
Okay.
can kind of see behind me here. Like I've
Mm.
got all these little bins. Like a couple of those bins are other hobbies. It's mostly
Ah.
Learn to Solder Kit stuff, right? That I store there. But once in a while, I'll be like, okay, I'm dedicating this bin to whatever weird hobby I'm going to try out now.
I'm really admiring your organization system here. This is really good.
We actually
Um,
just maybe 2 months ago, we finally upgraded outside of the house to a storage unit, right? So kind of
ooh.
interesting thing about how Learn to Solder Kits works too is we have 2 employees, but they actually work out of their homes. They're based in Sacramento, but we hired during COVID, which was like a really weird time, as everybody knows, right?
Mm.
And I was like, I'm gonna figure out how to make remote manufacturing assembly work somehow,
Wow.
right? Because it was maybe like 9 months into COVID. It wasn't ready to be working in person yet. And so we kind of figured out the strategy with pickups and drop offs. So those bins you see behind me right there, right? We would put parts in them, and then our employee would come and she would pick them up and she would do her assembly at home and then drop them off. And then it worked so well, just we kept doing it, right? Our employees love working from home, and I'm a big
Yeah.
supporter of remote work and work from home, kind of coming from the software engineer background. So we keep doing it. We do meet in person now sometimes, right, when it makes sense. But most of the work can be done on their own and at home.
Splendid. And this actually brings me back to this blog post that I was looking for earlier. Uh,
Yes.
how you got started, blah, 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 blah. I mean, very interesting. Definitely read it. But this thing, tell us about
Yes.
this. This is actually
Those
another thing that you have on your open source page.
It is. It is. And we do a lot of stuff like this, which is like, it's like low tech, maybe I would call it, for assembling, right? Because there's no motors in it. It spins. So it's on a Lazy Susan. You can put 16 bags in there. Those are those pink bags that are going to have the LEDs,
I
switches,
love
and
that it holds the
resistors.
bags open. That's so
And you
cool.
just load them in. It kind of holds the bags open, and then you spin it as you put parts in it, right? And it's not revolutionary exactly, but it
I mean,
definitely
it's literally revolutionary.
yeah.
Sorry, had to.
It is in some ways, right? But we try to do a lot of those little improvements to speed up our assembly time. And I think it helps with quality too. So we have that. The one big purchase we did last year is we bought a cutting machine, which is really
Ooh.
cool. And so we put in a big roll of wire, and that's for the jitterbug legs. And then it cuts it to
Oh,
length,
yeah.
right? It goes through the whole roll and cuts them all to length. And then we roll them up and put them in the kit. And that was like our big machine manufacturing purchase. But like most of the stuff we use is just like that little spinner, pretty simple things.
Yeah, and that's on your open source page under
Yes,
the
kit
kit
packing
packing
carousel. And
carousel.
we have like 6 of
Goes
those
to
now. I think
Onshape
each
as well.
employee has like 2 of them that we have
Ah,
their name on it, right? And I don't know, they do like a little double spinner thing when they pack. It just works really well. I think it's a good example of like, you don't have to over engineer the problem, right? Like a lot of people are like, oh, you should make a robot that opens the bag, that puts the
yeah.
parts in which would be cool. I totally think that would be cool. But the time it would take to design that and maintain it and all of that, the spinner was an afternoon of work, right, to design. And it works great. It never breaks down, right? Just spins.
Yeah. You don't have to charge it or anything.
Don't
This
have to
is so
charge
good. Ah, I knew I was gonna go down a little rabbit hole with that one as well. That's so
it.
good. And you've got things OSHA certified, which we can
We
dig
got
into.
OSHA certified. Yeah, we're big supporters of that. And I think it's great just for education and learning and our community.
Yeah. So you can explore. We had last month we had a couple of people on from the Open Source Hardware Association, aka OSHWA, and it's really simple to get a project certified. I learned a lot about that process. It's super cool. Still
Awesome.
haven't done it. Someday though.
I believe in you. Next time we meet, I'm going to ask
Thank
you
you.
what project you have certified.
Okay, yeah, absolutely harass me about that. So, okay, softball. How about your doggy? You mentioned you have a little doggy.
Oh, I
What's
do
her
have a little
name?
doggy. Her
What's
name
the
is
deal?
Kira. She's in the photo right here. She's a little black and white, 35-pound dog. She's super cute. She
Ah.
doesn't like anybody. But us, right? She likes us, but it's nice to have a little dog around, little companion while you're working in the workshop.
Absolutely. Okay, let's actually go back to the OSHWA thing for a second. Tell us about the process of getting your projects certified here, your
It's
kits
pretty
certified
easy.
here.
So we got certified a long time ago. I think the
Uh-huh.
date on that was 2016.
You've got
But
the 48th one in the
the
US for people to
48th
get.
one, which was when they first opened applications. We
Wow.
were actually at the Oshawa conference. I believe it was in Portland that
Oh,
year.
yeah.
And they talked about the process, and the applications opened and you could submit your application, but they wouldn't tell you who was going to get like number one. They did like a raffle, right? I think for the first 100 or whatever, randomized. But we were one of the first applications for that. And I think their standards are pretty doable. Oh, you can see Kira's over there behind me. Kind of. But they have some great guidelines online if you're looking to if you're looking to learn how to do open source, right? And it's all about sharing the knowledge, right? And not obfuscating everything. so other people can learn from it or can remix it, right? I love when people remix our kits. So if you do take our open source stuff and you decide to like make some changes, change the switches, do something like that, please share it with us. Share it with me on Twitter, share it with me in email. I'd love to see that stuff. I've seen some pretty cool creative ones that people have done. So I would love to add to that collection.
Yeah. I love it when people remix stuff and like go out and use it in the world. I just met someone at SuperCon where I was over the weekend, and they were like, "I use your Ouija board PCB for programming ESP8266." And I'm like, "Someone uses that! It's so exciting!"
No,
They're
it
like,
feels
"Yeah,
good to
remixes,
see it
so
in the
good."
wild, right?
Yeah. And you mentioned that you learned about it at Open Hardware Summit, which the 2024 one is already, the site is up, and they've got open their call for proposals.
Yeah.
Submit your talk
There's
before December 17th.
some great talks. So there's a
Author
great
workshop.
talk from the year that I went in Portland, which I want to say was 2016, maybe, about somebody talked about their Kickstarter project. And I know it's on YouTube
Oh.
somewhere. I'd have to like hunt it down, but they talked about their Kickstarter project and like what went wrong with their Kickstarter project
Oh,
and
nice.
like manufacturing it. And it was such a fascinating talk. And I still refer people to it because I'm like, people are often like, they have this kind of rosy view of like, I'm going to invent this thing. And they like build a cool prototype and it's awesome, right? They put it up on Kickstarter and it gets all this funding. Awesome, right? But then when it comes to really like manufacturing, shipping it, getting it into people's hands, it's really hard, right? And it's different
Mm.
challenges than building the prototype. So I think it's really valuable to learn from other people and what went wrong for them, what went right for them, right? If you want to build that hardware business.
Mm. I'm gonna try and find that talk, but if you find it,
I
drop it to
think
me
I
and
can
I'll.
find he talked about the camera module that they used, and that was like the problem that they had, right? Is they got all these camera units that were wrong, right?
Oh no.
It was bad. I mean, it was a journey. That talk took us on a journey, right? About ups and downs. I'll find it for you and send the link.
Yeah, you
Um,
can find a lot of the talks on for everyone's information on their YouTube channel. They've got playlists for each of the previous,
yeah,
many of the previous Hardware Summits.
yeah, that's good.
Cool.
I think something else that's interesting about open source hardware, and I get this from people who are less in the hardware community, but when I go to like business meetups and that kind of stuff, they're like, oh, like, why didn't you get a patent? Right?
Oh yeah.
I'm like, a patent on 3 buttons, 3 LEDs, 3 resistors, right? It's like, I don't feel like it's a really patentable thing. I mean, maybe, people get patents on like very weird things. But at least the philosophy that we have at Learn to Solder Kids, right? It's about education and teaching and sharing, right?
Yes.
And I think a patent, especially in this type of product that's not really bringing something new or unique to the world, is kind of anti that. And I feel like open source hardware is pro all of that, right? Open, sharing, learn, remix. Like, I want people to know every little thing about how this Blink kit works and gets produced. And I think Oshwa fits that philosophy a lot better.
Yeah.
And
There's a
then
lot
on
of
top of it, like, am I going to go to a court case to defend my patent on 3 buttons, 3 LEDs, right? Like, it's just like what I would not pay a lawyer, to do that. I would sit through that. Like, anybody can put together 3 switches and LEDs. I do not own that. I was not the first person to like think it up, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so let's see. We got a couple of minutes left. Are there? So we mentioned Alpenglow before, who are
Yeah.
really cool. That's Carrie Sundra, and let me see if I can
Yes.
close them. We had them on the chat as well. Really cool kits. Are there other like kits that you consider deluxe or ones that you would
Yeah.
recommend for
And I
people
think
that
he
you?
was on your show a while ago. Is it called Oscatone?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, what is
Oscar.
those audio kits, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I can't remember his name now, but I think he was
Tommy.
on your show, and I thought those kits were really cool
Yeah.
when I saw those. And I think the audio world has some cool electronics overlap.
Oh my
Yes,
word. The
those
whole
ones.
like modular synthesizer PCB
Yeah,
community is just It's so much candy, and I have to restrain myself. Like, I cannot get into that hobby ever. It will destroy all of it.
I've avoided getting into it as well. I mean, I see it, I admire it, right? I celebrate the project, but I'm like, I can't go down that path.
No,
I have too
we
many
know
op
it would destroy us.
Yeah.
It's like the One Ring. Just like oh, you know what? Okay, here's one.
Okay.
When we were in high school, I remember that you introduced me to The Killers, and there were a couple of other songs that I remember just like, I really enjoyed your taste in music. So what have you been listening
Oh.
to lately?
Oh, that's a great question. So I went on kind of a weird path. So I'm just gonna share that here. This might not be for everybody. But I kind
Excellent.
of got into what's called folk punk, which is like
Oh, yeah.
acoustic punk. So their Mischief Brew is a really great folk punk band that you should maybe give a listen to if you like that kind of stuff. It's an interesting mix. It is not for everybody. I've shared that with some friends,
Both
and
the system.
and it's not for them, but it's for me, right? And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I enjoy. It's an interesting genre.
Yeah, there's also, like, some of the Celtic bands like Flogging Molly and whatever I think sort of count as
Yeah.
that. Then there's, like, Gogol Bordello, who are more a Balkan
Yes.
sort of, like lots of amplification, so I can't say it's purely acoustic, but, like, "Oh, I'll be checking these
But
guys
yeah,
out."
it's definitely kind of in that style, right?
Excellent.
So yeah, give it a try. See what you think.
Neat. Haha, tucking that one in the pocket. Okay, let's see. What else can I torture you with? Uh,
More
what
high
was
school stuff. No.
do you still do taekwondo?
I don't still do taekwondo. That was
Me
a while
neither.
ago, but I loved it.
Uh, yeah, how do you choose what to, release as a kit? Kitify.
Good question. And so we have a lot of debate around this, I would say. And one of the things I really focused on, especially early in the business, and this might be changing a little bit in the future, is doing fewer kits, right? Which I think is
Ooh, yeah.
different than a lot of people's kind of kit business. Um, but I just felt like the more SKUs I had, right, that you're selling,
Mm.
so SKUs is like what you're selling in your shop, the more complicated it would be to keep inventory in stock, just to like keep track of everything. Um, and so we really focused on less. And you'll also notice in our kits, we have a ton of overlap.
Oh, yes.
So let me show you a couple things. So like the battery holder and battery size in all our kits is the same, right?
Mm.
CR32. And then you'll see there's like an overlap. So like if you look at the jitterbug and the hue, we use the same switch right here, this black switch. And it's also here on the hue. So we try and reuse as many parts as we can in the kits because that helps with the inventory issues, right? Because like not only do you have your assembled kits you have to keep track of, but you have all the parts that go into the assembled kits that you have to keep track of and order and not run out of, right? And so
Yeah.
like things like the batteries and the battery holders, we stock up a ton on because it's happened before, especially early on, where like we run out of battery holders, right? And that means we can't ship any kits, right? Because they all have the same battery holder. So we just have tons of those now, right? But then the
Yeah.
other challenge with an e-commerce business, if you want to get like really into it, is like cash flow, right? And so
Mm.
like how much money are we going to tie up in battery holders or in boards? Like which piece is so expensive? And if it's sitting on the shelf and
Mm.
it hasn't sold, it's kind of like inert money, right? That's just not doing anything. So you don't want to overstock. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, this is something that came up a bunch of years ago. Interviewed Matt from Bear Conductive, and
Mhm.
they talked about this like just-in-time kit assembly where they had each
Yeah.
of these things in their kind of own little package so they could sell them a la carte, like
Yeah.
these little conductive paint tubes. But then all their kits were like a bunch of those sort of shoved into one box
Mhm.
together, and they had this kind of similar idea of like tiny baby me. Where,
I'll have
where
to go watch that one because I bet I would like it. Because that's like, I mean, the thing about running a kit business is people are like, oh, it's so cool. You must like design projects all the time. Like, I never design new kits, right? We have 3 kits. Like, I designed them in 2015. Um, And like it's so much more about like logistical problems,
Mm.
which are also interesting problems for certain people, right? But I do think there's sometimes a misconception about like I'm going to make a maker business, I'm going to make a kit business, and I'm going to just design kits all day, right? Well,
Mhm.
designing kits doesn't really make the business money, right? I mean, maybe if you make it and sell it and it's popular, right? But kind of R&D is a big time and money sink.
Oh, yeah.
And then you got to figure out how to make enough of these and how many do you need to sell to be profitable and all of that. And you're going to spend a lot more time running your business on those problems than on
Mm.
designing new kits, right?
And there's also kind of a brand identity thing where people get familiar with, like, the things that you sell, and, like, it's like, "Oh, we've got
Mhm.
these ones," and people know about them, and, like, you kinda get known for those things, and, introducing lots more stuff you can be cool, but also it can mean that, like, people aren't as aware of, like, what you do exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, awesome. Okay, so one last question. 2 last questions. Best value tool you have, quality for the price.
Okay, I love that solder sucker that they have on Adafruit.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
that nice solder sucker. I wanna say it's like 25 or $30 maybe, which is expensive for a solder sucker, but it is the nicest solder sucker.
It's true. It makes such a difference because the tip of it
Yes,
doesn't
no,
want
oh, it's
anything
only
replaced.
$18, man. I'd pay $30 for it. I just think it's such a nice solder sucker.
And it's beautiful, and yeah, you can replace the silicone
Works
tip.
really well. Like if you've used those cheap solder suckers, which I do use. I mean, I'm not above using a $2.50 solder sucker, but if you use them, like the spring comes out and like the whole thing like falls apart. This one
Yeah.
just is really nice. If you're doing a lot of soldering, I would definitely recommend having this in
Yeah, yeah.
your setup. It's just going to make your life a lot better. I don't recommend it generally for like beginners. If you're not sure if you're really going to get into the soldering hobby, you probably don't need it. But if you are soldering regularly, this is the one.
Or if you're running soldering workshops, I think a lot of the function of, like, the teacher in that case is to, like, help
Yep.
people mm, unmistake I'm gonna, censor myself there, their projects, like, if someone makes a little
Yeah.
mistake, and it's, like, sometimes easiest to be like, "Okay, let me just, like, undo the last step there," and then you can, like,
Yep.
redo it, and the solder sucker is really helpful for that.
Absolutely.
Similarly, I love Adafruit's, like, silicone-coated hookup wire.
Mhm.
Same idea, like, the silicone just doesn't get damaged, it doesn't shrink, it doesn't burn, and it stays
Something about
flexible.
quality, right? I mean, just having nice things when you're working makes a difference.
Yes, it makes such a difference. Okay, final question. What is there, a technology that you're really excited about that's going to, you think, change your experience as a
Hmm.
hardware builder or the general culture, or could be anything like EVs, space,
Wow.
home?
That's like
Yeah,
a really big question.
I
So
know.
so something I'm kind of interested in, and this is actually because Andy, who I work with, has worked in the industry, is construction. Um,
Ooh.
and just like building more affordable homes and ways that we can do that, right? And I don't think it's necessarily through 3D printing. I know some people do, right? But I think there's some interesting things around like modular homes and manufactured
Mm.
homes that I'm hoping will bring down the cost of housing. I mean, I live here in Sacramento, California. Housing is very expensive. I mean, it's very expensive everywhere in the US. And so I'm very interested to see where that goes. And I'm hopeful that we will find some cost savings there. We'll see.
I love that. Yeah, same, living in California, a huge concern all the time. Just the idea of ever being able to own a home, and that's extremely real. I love it. Real world stuff. Well, this is all the time that we have for today, but I'm really excited that, like, we somehow ended up both in California, both doing electronic stuff, and,
I
like, we got to
know.
just, like, nerd out about this. It's so cool.
I tell people from our high school that you're famous. I'm like, famous in the maker world. You don't understand. It's on YouTube and it's so cool.
I feel like I'm the perfect amount of, like, I can sort of, like, show people what I do, and they're like, "Oh," sometimes they kinda, like, get it sometimes, but, like, not enough that, like, anyone would ever pull anything nefarious or, like, I guess,
Right. You can't walk down the street
so
without people recognizing
micro,
you.
micro. Nano. I gotta consult my SI units cheat sheet, like Pico Celebrity or something.
The perfect amount of celebrity.
Just the right amount.
That's
All right.
yeah.
Well, I can't wait to see you around more, and good
Yeah,
luck with both the Learn to Solder kits and Evergreen Support. I think that's a really exciting thing for young small businesses, even like older small businesses. But yeah, all kinds of
yeah.
good stuff there. And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm
Yeah.
active on Twitter, right? So if people
Oh
want to reach
yes.
out with questions, feel free to shoot me,
All of the
a tweet
links.
or a direct message. You
Yeah.
can also just shoot me an email. We have an email address on the Learn to Solder Kits website. So feel free to reach out. I love chatting about business stuff, right? So if you're thinking about starting your own business, or you have your own business and you have questions, or you just want to, commiserate with another small business owner, I'm here for it, right? So definitely feel free to reach out. I am friendly and available on the internet to chat with you.
Yeah. Well, and thank you everyone else for joining us. Come back next week for another Hackster Live. Actually, we're going to be doing Hackster Cafe next week as part of our Impact Summit, which is happening virtually and live. It's a free 2-day virtual developer summit, and our theme this year is sustainable and resilient cities. It's going to be all these cool people talking about, like, we got talks, we got panels, we got workshops, all this good stuff around like making cities better into the future with hardware, all kinds, especially predictive maintenance, things like that. I think it's going to be an awesome time. Go check out Impact Summit.
Very cool.
I'll put the link there. I totally forgot to plug this, but yeah, join us for the Impact Summit. It'll be great. That our Hackster Cafe next week will be at a slightly different time. It will be during the summit, and you can find that on the schedule, along with our cool keynotes and all these other cool people doing neat stuff. Really excited about this. Okay, again, thank you all for joining us. We'll see you soon, and hack on.
Bye, everybody.